Well, when you head back to, you have to remind me of that location now as a corporal. You're going back here. Where is that?
Yeah, go back to Bulmer.
Bournemouth. Bournemouth or Bournemouth?
Bulmer.
Bournemouth.
It's like
Okay.
Boomer. It's Boulmer.
Okay. Bournemouth. What are you going back there for? Are you doing the same job you did kind of like the 2 years prior and when you were there for the first 3 years of your career and just taking over as a corporal?
So no, you do different roles. There's certain roles that are rank dependent. So I went on to, they're still in the same operations room. So just imagine a picture like banks of maybe 30, 40 different computers with loads of different screens. And I moved to another bank, which is a bit more senior position. So I used to work with like the top guy, which would be the master controller, which is as cool as it sounds. Yeah, that kind of name. And we would be basically his bitch, basically.
Okay. And what was you doing? So with that role, you'll be doing tasks even though you're someone's bitch, right?
Oh yeah, like you were the one doing the job most of the time. He wasn't on position, or he or she wasn't on position most of the time. It's only when it really kicked off you needed that person there. So things we would be doing, we would be overseeing the rest of the ops room, our rank. So we'd be looking at everyone else's screens, making sure everyone else is doing their job. But we'd also be tasked with making sure the quick reaction force. So these are things like the typhoons, up at that point we're up in like Lossiemouth or Lucas down in Coningsby, and then obviously making sure the tanker at Brize they were all basically serviced, ready to go, and communicated. So you just basically plate spinning, making sure everything was just ready to go at a moment's notice.
Okay.
The other thing I should say is you had you had something called the bat phone, which was this red phone. And this red phone, with the second it went, it used to send the heebie-jeebies up, yeah? Because if that phone went, it meant there was an aircraft that hadn't communicated with civilian air traffic. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be the pilot has fallen asleep, which does happen sometimes. They've missed a check-in, or there could be a potential dangerous situation on board, or there's a passenger who is basically violent or is one of these kind of at-risk passengers, so one of these kind of maybe on the terrorist watch list. So if that phone rang and you had to answer it, you would answer it, and then everyone just dropped everything and listened to you as you took the information and you communicated it out. You kind of shouted it out to the rest of the team.
Wow. That's a great insight. So, yeah, we see TV shows and movies and stuff that kind of show something like that, but the fact that you've experienced that for real, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I have another question now.
I still used to. Yeah, go for it. Well, I was going to say, for a couple of years after leaving the military, certain phones would have a similar ring than this bat phone, and it would just make me jolt. I'd walk into a shop, and it would be a similar ring, and I would just be like, "Oh my god, I've got to do something." It was a weird feeling. It took years for that to kind of fade away.
Yeah, I bet. So my kind of weird question, right? So I like aviation. I like looking at the likes of flight radar, and occasionally you'll see certain jets go past or something like that, and then you jump on flight radar and you won't see it. So do you? And you might not know this answer, but do you know if what we're seeing as civilians on flight radar is every single aircraft's box turned on, or is there certain ones that you get to see at a military level, which is basically all of that plus more? Like, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so we used to use flight radar even in my role to pick up civilian airliners, certain flight plans, and so on. But yeah, there'll be a difference because obviously it's not as real time as what we would be seeing. So the screens that we have is live radar feeds. Like it's not just it's not an algorithm plumbing in basically flight plans. We're seeing a completely accurate live feed, and that'll include military and non-military. So an example would be any airliner who doesn't basically use a transponder to put out a code, like the squawking code to let people know where they are, they won't be on that. And there is loads of jets that won't use it for certain reasons, both friend and foe.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier when you like initially started there that you would oversee the UK. So is that what you're doing? You're basically looking over the whole of the UK to make sure that everyone's playing the game, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So you get all the feeds in from all the local air traffics across the UK, and then we get the military feeds as well. And then we have civilian radars, obviously, we get data on, but then we have military radars across the UK. So we basically have all those feeds gone into one basically screen. I would normally sit in front of 3 different screens, but all the data is coming into one basically, and we'd use certain ones for other stuff. And it's you look at it and you go, oh my god, because the UK airspace is the busiest airspace in the world, particularly down towards Heathrow and London. So it's mad. If you're trying to find a plane that's basically, you get a call on the back phone and goes, this airliner, say it's a Ryanair 2301 from Alicante coming back to Manchester. Finding that when you've got 15, 20,000 flights going through at one time, it's a needle in the haystack. So it's like it's everyone just searching both by eye and by certain algorithms and flight tracker and stuff like that we would use as well.
Yeah, that's madness. So your second time there, just as a collective, how long was that second stint there as a corporal?
So my second stint, so I went back there in sort of end of 2014, and I was there until I left, so in 2017.
Okay, so like you're looking at 3 years there. So
Yeah.
can you share some like really? I'm guessing it's kind of same thing. You were there for 3 years, doing the same job for 3 years, or did you have any opportunities to kind of like head off and support something else?
So yeah, we did an out of area to the Falklands during that, so like a 4-monther, which was fucking great. To be honest, it's kind of funny because I moved from one bunker, and out in the Falklands, we also have to, of course, we have to be in a nuclear bunker again or a reinforced bunker again because we're the guys who get blown up straight away in the war. So I moved from one windowless room to another.
Yeah. How long? You said 4 months. So what year was that? What year was that?
Yeah, so that would have been 2014.
2014. Okay. So that was nearly that was 9 years after I was there. So I was there in 2009, down there for I think about 4 months as well. Yeah, 3 or 4 months. Yeah, that's right. Because my unit were out there for 5, but I came back earlier. And my uncle was actually stationed out there. He's RAF, and he took me up to go and see the. I forget the name of them. Maybe don't need to say it, but the missiles that are set up there, and the team that sit with them. And I kind of like went and said hi, and they showed me how it's operated and how they keep track of things. So yeah, I kind of got a glimpse into what it's like being somewhere where it's very quiet, nothing's happening, but you're always waiting for something to happen. And then when it does, you need to snap into action and carry out your job. So I can see why it might get a bit boring, but yeah, what can you share from the Falklands? Because I'm guessing you didn't just stay inside the bunker for 4 months.
No, thankfully not. And to be honest, that was my first proper contact with the army, was because we worked together out in the Falklands, because I know what you're talking about, the kind of missile battery. We'd be working together, we'd be coordinating stuff with them. So it was a really nice experience actually, because I think in the military, we get this very kind of silo, kind of tribal approach where it's like the trade or the service I'm in is the good one. The other two are basically dog shit. And that's probably how I was kind of maybe immersed when I was in the RAF. So actually working with the army was a really lovely experience during the Falklands with that. But yeah, there was lots of like a load of shite jobs I had to do out in Falklands, but some fun stuff as well. Like what they set up was like, oh, you're going to do one day basically razor wiring on one of the mountainsides. So it's really easy. You'll have a great time. It'd be brilliant. There was like maybe 40 of us. Tri-service. There's some Navy guys there as well. And then there's like a week later, you're still razor wiring on the side of a mountain. And like the side of the mountain, you know what Falklands is like. There's very little ozone. You get burned in like a hazy day. There's hammering it rain, 70, 80 mile an hour winds on a calm day. And I remember just razor wiring, the rain just lashing into you. You can't see anything. Your clothes are just ringing through. You're getting sunburned at the same time. You're carrying this razor wire. You're on an incline of 15 or 20%. And you think, what am I doing here? But there's part of me that, do you know what? That was closer to the military I wanted to join, was being out there in the elements. And, do you know, even when we were there, it made me think of, do you know, the Argentinians who were out there during the Falklands War, because we'd find their plimsolls, because they used to wear plimsolls because they would desert if you let them have the boots that night. So you felt connected into the history of the military, both, you know, our one and other ones at the same time. So it was actually a good experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you got to experience that and that you enjoyed it that much. I just remember the Falklands. I just hated the 4 seasons in a single day. Like that's the one thing I hated. But I really liked seeing all the wildlife out there. But yeah, the land is just very, very marshy, isn't it? And it's very. I don't know if you experienced that on the hillsides, but yeah, it's an interesting place for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing I'd say, which is a great experience, I remember because you have that one road in the Falklands, you know, you're kind of going out to port, the kind of town. And as you all know, it was pretty much booby trapped all along either side of the road. There's all minefields there, or like, you know, suspected minefields, and it hadn't been cleared. And it was a gravel track, you know, all landies, you know, 30 mile an hour speed limited. And you weren't allowed to drive on the road when it got really bad. So anything over 70, 80, 90 mile an hour, you weren't allowed to drive. But I remember one time we had basically a senior officer that was in the port and we needed him back for operations. And I had to go out in the landy at around maybe 100 mile an hour winds and a high-sided vehicle. And I remember driving, and it's literally minefields, 10 meters this way, 10 meters that way. And the landy was like going sideways. I'm still accelerating, and you're just going sideways. You're like looking at the road. You think, this is brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant, because you felt like, you know, this is a bit of excitement, a bit of a thrill. Like, obviously I didn't want to get blown up or anything, but stuff like that, you think, it's fucking great crack. There's, you know, a reason why you joined.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am glad you got to experience the Falklands, because the fact that this is kind of like, you know, a chunk of time in your service before you actually head off to somewhere. It's great to hear that you actually did get to experience that. So after those 4 months and you make your way back, you go back to your role, and it sounds like it's coming to the end of like your time in. So what's making you think about leaving? Is it something outside? Is it the trade, the role, the job that you're kind of like wanting to move away from? Where's your mindset at?
Yeah, so I was probably, when I went down the Brize, I really loved that. You know, it was a bit of a thrill, but it was still like, even when it was busy, it was still, I wanted to be a little bit more physical in my role. I wanted to actually be out in the field and doing stuff as well. There's so little opportunities for that. So when I was probably halfway through my 9 years, I was like, am I going to get this in the RAF? And I kept coming up with the answer is going to be no. So then I was thinking, well, what do I need to do? Because if I need to leave, I've got nothing. I did the Irish system, so I left with kind of A-levels-ish, like rubbish A-levels, had no other qualifications. So I was like, I need to do something. So that's when I thought, well, what do I want to do? So I started doing something with the Open University and just doing a degree in psychology at that point. And that was when, at my halfway point, I was already going, I know this is my exit plan now. So I planned for those kind of 4 years really to do the degree, then what would be next, what next step I would have to take, and so on.
Okay. So how did you find the studying part with the, I guess, juggling of your role? Was that fairly doable?
It was really tough because I started off, I thought, well, I'll do it part time. And I was like, no, I wanted to get this degree done in like 3 or 4 years. So I was doing 25, 30 hours of studying a week. And in the role got quite busy actually when I went back to Boulmer. So I was doing maybe 60-hour weeks. You had a leave ban as well because there was so little of people doing because you get qualified in certain roles. And even within my trade, if you got more and more qualified, there was less and less of you. It was like a pyramid. So when I got to the top of the pyramid, I was one of 2 or 3 doing what I could do. So it meant that if we were all working, we couldn't take annual leave. Like we had to be in rotating shifts. So there was a period where 18 months where getting leave was gone and you were working basically on your days off as well. So during that time, doing a 60-hour week and doing my 30 hours studying, it was horrendous. I have to say it was absolutely horrendous. But it was a means to an end. I knew 2, 3 years and then it would be okay. But it wasn't easy. No way, shape or form was easy. I wasn't very studious at that time, but oh my God, did I learn to be.
Okay. And so you had that mindset of that's what you're going to look into when you get out. Did you give yourself that actual end date, or does it work slightly differently in the RAF to the Army? Because with the Army, you kind of sign up for like 22, 24 years. In fact, they changed that recently, didn't they? But basically, yeah, when I joined, it was 22 years. And then if you wanted to get out before the end of that time, you would give them a 1 year's notice. So how was it kind of for your time in with the RAF? Was it blocks or did you have to give them a year's notice?
Yeah, so I originally signed up for 9 years and 3 reserve. That was what the commitment was. They wouldn't offer 22 years to anyone joining the RAF. That's all based upon promotion. So when I got promoted, they offered me the 22, and I did something unusual. I turned it down, which they were very shocked at. Because I was like, no, I have my 9 years. And they basically said, look, we'll do 9 years and we'll stick to your 3 years, but we can add it on. Because I needed a line in the sand for me, really, Gav. If I had the 22 years, it would have been too safe. And I would go, well, I can delay it a year. But because I'd set this timer, so basically when I got promoted, they made it 12 years. So I had to serve 12 years, and the notice period for me was 18 months. So yeah, it was, I knew I had to give that period of time, but I knew I was out basically in 12 years by hook or by crook.
Right. Okay. So you gave them that year and a half notice. Is that what you said? And then what's your kind of like mindset with the transition out of the RAF?
Well, I say you had to give 18 months because my trade was in short supply at that time, but I actually got out within a month. It was a weird situation. It was, I basically I'd finishing my degree and I was going to be finished in June of 2017. And so before it came up to Christmas, I went to see jobs on NHS because I wanted to be a psychologist. And you can't be a psychologist with a degree. You need a doctorate. So you need to do 7 years of study. So I knew I could do that. But there's entry-level positions you can get beforehand. And I just chanced my arm before I'd even handed in my notice. I just applied for things. No one else going to get knocked back, but hoping that I would get a contact that might go, well, look, this is what you're missing or this is what you could need. But one of these jobs I applied for, so the first interview, I got really lucky. I don't know if they were just looking for the quota of men or what, but I got lucky and he offered me the job. So I was in a really difficult sort of quandary because I had to give 18 months, but they wanted me to start. A civilian job doesn't want you to give an 18-month notice period. The job's gone. So what I had to do was I had to go back to work and say, can I leave in a month? And I was flatly told, no, basically wind your neck and you're an idiot. But luckily, the big wigs, the big bosses who were above me were really nice and they liked me. I don't know, I must have kissed enough asses, I must have made enough brews. I don't know what it was. And they basically made an executive decision to run without me for at least 2 years, because it would be 2 years, even though it was an 18-month period, because to train someone up to do my role would take 2 years. So they signed it off and I was gone in a month. So I had done pretty much no resettlement. 1 minute I was in the military, the next minute I was in Civvy Street not wearing a uniform. So it was mile a minute.
Yeah, that's madness. That is that quick. So on a personal level, you've obviously gone for the studying, you've gone for this this other job, being accepted, and therefore they've offered it to you. But that 1 month of de-kitting, I don't even know if you moved, you had to do all that. Was it a bit of a whirlwind with the transition out, or did you actually find it better because it was so quick?
You know what? It was quick in one way. It was quick in the time period of leaving. But like I said, I'd started the process mentally of leaving 3 years before that, because I knew I was doing a degree and what I wanted to do after the military. So psychologically, I was already moving in the idea of leaving. But oh my God, was it a whirlwind? Because I actually left I handed in, the 1 month period was over Christmas as well. So everything was fucking closed. So I had to do pretty much all my clearing within around 2 days. So I had to hand kit in, had to go to the med centre. I had to do all my admin parts within basically 48 hours. So it was awful. And I wasn't staying up north in Boulmer. I was moving to the opposite side of the country. I was going down to Southampton, which, I had a partner at that point, but I had pretty much nothing. I just had to go out and find places to live and everything. So it was so quick I didn't have time to think about it, which was good, but it was a bit all over the place.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a fairly okay transition, because when you do get out after that move, do you find it's what you want? Do you find that you actually found your feet?
Yeah, the thing that I really love, I went straight out and I was doing, so it's being in psychology. So I wasn't a psychologist at that point, but I was doing therapy. I was like an assistant psychologist. So there was so much studying to do. There was you always had to, it was busy basically. It was mile a minute. And I loved that. That's what was kind of missing in the military for me. It was a bit too slow paced a lot of the time. So back in Civvy Street, it was so busy because then I had to do, as part of this job, they paid for me to do a postgrad. So I had to do that at the same time. It was pretty decent, to be fair, but it was fast paced. Yeah.
Nice. So just remind us of the year that was that you got out. 20.
Yeah, so it was 9 years to the day, really. It was January 2017 I left.
Okay. And so how have you found civilian life within potentially that role, or anything you want to share from your time out so far?
Yeah, there's so many differences. There's so many different. Because I think I was lucky in some respects. I moved into mental health. And in mental health, the black humour is on a par with the military from what I found. The language, the inappropriate things that people say, because you need it. And it's the same reason you need it in the military, because you go through some really, really shit times and you need to be able to laugh about those sort of things as well, because that helps. So being involved in mental health meant that was easy enough. But I have to say, the biggest difference, I left the RAF and it's all men, bar a couple of women. I joined mental health psychology and it's the flip reverse. I was like one of two men and there was around 30 to 40 women. So it was a sea change in that sense.
Yeah. That's cool that you had a nice transition over. I mean, do you think it would be something you would advise people to go into if they have even the smallest of interest in it, who have been in the military before? Do you think it's quite a rewarding area?
I would definitely say so. Now, like I've done all my training now, so I'm like a proper psychologist now. I work with ex-military people, so like doing research and also like therapeutic parts. I love it. I think more military people should be involved in things like this because it's crying out, particularly like mental health nurses. My wife has worked with ex-military men as nurses, mental health nurses, and she said they're absolutely gold standard. They're incredible. They've got the humour, they've got the sort of can-do attitude. They've got everything to make it work. So yeah, I would definitely recommend any military people involved in kind of mental health because I think we have a lot to give in that, and we bring a different sort of skill set that civvies don't have. The amount of times people tell me, go, "Oh, well, you're timekeeping. You're so like you say yes to everything. You'll try everything. You'll do," and I go, "That's nothing special to me. That's 99% of people in the military. It's something that we're either born with or it's bred into us through it." So, yeah, I totally think there's a lot to give in those sort of roles for ex-military.
Yeah, nice. It sounds great. It sounds really good. I'm glad you kind of like land on your feet after your time in the military. But I think that pretty much brings us up to date. So a little bit of a whirlwind tour on your time in the military, and a little insight into what you're doing these days. And I know that because of your role within the military, within the RAF, there's little stories that you can share. But thank you for doing the sharing that you have done. But was there anything that we didn't get to cover during this little recording that you thought I'd like to share that? Or did we actually get to cover everything?
You know what? Like for me, it was just looking back really on my military experience. I see a lot of similarities, and something that came up for me when I was starting to do psychology was that I joined the military after my dad. My dad died. I didn't think it was part of my kind of transition in. But when I was in the military, every second person I would speak to, every second mate, had a similar experience. Either a dad that wasn't there, or difficulties with the dad, or a parent had died when they were young. So I think there's more that drives us into sort of these sort of roles than we think, than we imagine. And I have to say, I'm still in contact with so many guys who are in the military now, and you form relationships and bonds that is so much more different than civvy world. Like like the mates I have in the military, you put nothing on being able to step in front of a car for them. Like it's a different sort of connection that you really can't explain, and it's a strong relationship. So I'm very lucky. I think that did help with my transition, was having connections still with some of the guys in the military as well. Definitely.
Nice. Well, that's great to hear, and also thank you, for kind of coming on and actually sharing that part of the RAF that we don't actually hear too much about. So that's been really cool to hear. But we are at the point in your episode where we can give some advice. So it'd be awesome if you could share some advice for people that are thinking of joining the military, and that could be joining the RAF, or you said you spent some time with the army in the Falklands. So any advice you've got to people that are thinking of joining the military?
Yeah, I would say, really take your time basically thinking about what you want to do, and don't go into an AFCO with basically the blank canvas. Do your research before you get there, because the AFCOs are terrible for selling the role that suits their numbers. So really take your time. And what I'd recommend, and wish I had done really at that time, was, if you pick a role that you like and there's a delay in it starting, or, say it's not taking for 6 months, if it's what you want to do, take that time, build some more skills and go in and do the one you want. Because when you're in, you can get siloed into roles that you may not like. And actually the Air Force, the Army, Navy, they're huge services. And I guarantee you, there's a role to suit most people in those. So don't, in two things, do your research before you go in, but don't always just listen to someone who's a naysayer about their experiences, because the people who often do naysay about the military, it's often the people who do leave quite early. Who go, I've had a bad experience. Do your own research, take your time. I guarantee you'll find a role that will suit you.
Cool. Some nice advice there. And the other bit of advice is for veterans out there. So you've been out for a good chunk of time now. So any advice for people, be that about to leave the military or being out for a little while?
Yeah, so like I said, I've been very lucky to do research with veterans, with ex-military people, and there's a message that all of them have communicated, and it stands true for me as well. You're gonna respond to transition much better if you don't just completely cut links with the life you had. It's a big transition, that leaving the military. Even if you've been in 2-3 years or you've been in 20 years, it's a big transition. Keep in contact, either with the people that you were serving with or linking in with different groups in your area, because our strength is as a unit, and even if you don't feel it's a benefit to you, it will be a benefit to someone else linking in, or you linking in with them. So I really recommend it. We're in it together, and I think sometimes that gets lost when we leave. We feel we're on the outside, we're feeling we're not part of that anymore, but it's only a phone call away. There's a club everywhere, so please do link in if you can.
Nice. Some great advice there. So Gerry, that pretty much, like I said, brings us up to date. And thanks for sharing the advice you have. How was it for you coming on the show and sharing your time in? Did you hear that?
Was
I don't know
there
if
a
you heard
question?
that.
It kind of cut out there.
Oh, mate, I'm gonna say this right now, live on air. This has been the most shocking, remote recording I've done in freaking 4.5 years. Will be 5 years when this goes live. So, god damn it. So yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but we'll see what comes out of the editing. My question was, how was it for you coming on the show and being a guest?
It was actually amazing, and for a number of things. 'Cause when I left the military, I didn't really feel very military, and it's only gone full circle the last couple of years. I've started to think, you know what, it has meant a lot to me, and it does still mean a lot for me. So coming on and talking about these sort of things today has just been great, because it kind of connects me in with the stories, the people, the journey, and I think for me it's something to be held on to, not just kind of brushed off as something on the CV.
Yeah. And as I said to you, it's part of the RAF that not many people hear about. So, it's been great to hear about that. So thank you once more for sharing everything you have, and also your time, giving up some of your time to be with us today. So thank you very much for doing that.
No, thanks a million, Gav. I absolutely love the work you're doing here. I found this really important, so I'm sure there's plenty of other people who find it equally important.
Brilliant. And also, I say this to all my guests, thank you for your service.
You're welcome.
Great stuff. All right, Gerry, well, been awesome having you on. But enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, I'm now going to finish off like I normally do, but there's no lag, there is lag, so I'm just going to say it. All right, so here we go. This has been Military Veterans Podcast, out.